Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Samantha Motter, the marketing analyst for Aurora. We're joined today by the Trend Micro team to discuss Cloud One workload security. A few housekeeping notes: please silence your phone. You will be on mute. And if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Our speaker today is Jason Dablo from the Trend Micro team. Make sure to stick around following the presentation for trivia with prizes benefiting the LA Food Bank, starting at around 4:30. Jason, after you.
Great, thank you so much, Sam, and thanks for all of the attendees today. Awesome to be here and be a part of this. I always look forward to trivia as well, so looking forward to that right after this short presentation as well. So my name is Jason Dablo, representing Trend Micro. We'll be talking a little bit about our technologies, but more importantly, offering some kind of knowledge transfer, I would say, around some cloud misconfigurations and other things that we've seen from some of our research that we do here at Trend Micro. To start, I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit of the different solutions that we have to offer here at Trend Micro. So with the, when you're talking about protecting network environments, that's something that we are also very successful in with our tipping point series of network IPS devices. We also do some threat discovery and hunting with our deep discovery line of appliances as well, which can be installed much like an IPS and look at tapped traffic to find and detect really customized different malware that might be targeting your organization. We also have our Smart Protection Suites, which is focused on endpoint protection, so protecting the users and what they're doing in different environments, whether that's email, protecting their web surfing, or protecting their mobile devices, PCs, laptops, and also the corresponding mail servers as well. And then finally, our hybrid cloud security kind of point of view in terms of protecting server environments from different types of threats, anything from malware that might get on your server environments all the way to protecting the network traffic with intrusion prevention from a host-based level as well. All three of these are kind of feed into our back-end intelligence with our Smart Protection Network, and ultimately bring it all together with our new XDR technology, which allows us to correlate threats that are happening between your user environments, your network environments, your server environments, and give you that cross-investigation capabilities across all these different platforms. So all three of these kind of all feed into that XDR, that visibility detection and response platform, again, enabling us to give you that cross-visibility between these three different, I would say, areas of expertise, particularly within Trend Micro. I'm focusing a bit on the Trend Micro Cloud One services today, and more importantly, on the right-hand side, the use case around cloud operational excellence. What this essentially is cloud teams, as they start deploying more and more workloads into a cloud environment, they need to start developing cloud ops or cloud engineers, which will maintain the compliance, the governance across the cloud platforms based on the different services that you might be using. You also have this, I would say, new generation of techniques like infrastructure as code that development teams are using to actually deploy this cloud infrastructure as well. So they can actually use things like their IDE or code building tools to actually write and develop the architecture that it's going to be built on within a cloud environment as well. And this is really important in that there's all different types of kind of challenges that need to be met when you're introducing additional flows that might be coming from DevOps teams, like maybe a lack of visibility or making sure that compliance is met the same way that it is on premise. And as these cloud services are rapidly changing, how do you actually incorporate those operational techniques, those compliance with these brand new services as well? There's also a number of security challenges that you might have that, again, development or DevOps teams might not be privy to, or it hasn't been automated within their development pipelines to push out when they're developing the architecture as code, making sure that that's also compliant with things that need to be done within an environment. So this is the premise around cloud operational excellence. You might also hear the term CCOE, which is the Center of Cloud Operational Excellence as well. And so infrastructure as code, just as a definition here, is really about taking, a line-by-line commands that developers or DevOps teams can build very, very easily in a repeatable process, and do that in terms of allowing them to deploy infrastructure in the same manner. So a sample here for, say, an S3 bucket within AWS, you have things like determining the type of resource that's being created as well as the name. And then you can also do other things like, say, if it's going to be encrypted or define the security of this bucket. And again, it can all be done with just a few lines of code, where if you wanted to deploy this using, say, the AWS UI, you might have 10, 15, 20 clicks that you would have to do to actually create the same thing. So it creates this repeatable process that's able to be done within the environment. For those of you that are, working in cloud environments, it might be interesting to know how many of you are familiar with the AWS well-architected framework. If you are, maybe just throw a yes in the chat, or if you're not, have no fear. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes defining it real quick as well. So the well-architected framework is all about creating a set of best practices that are actually created by AWS themselves. So essentially, with their millions of customers that they have around the world today, they have that ability to really create and know the best practices that should be designed for their particular services. It increases the likelihood of success, and it's a public framework that allows teams in technical roles to really build against this framework, to making sure that they're following, again, those best practices when building in a cloud environment. It's made up of a series of questions, so they're open-ended questions around 5 specific pillars. So the 5 are operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. I'm not going to say that there may or may not be a trivia question on this in the future, but it might help to take notes, particularly of this screen as well. So for some examples of what we see in terms of these 5 pillars, and some of examples of the questions that are asked as parts of this well-architected framework. So something like in the reliability pillar, how do you back up your data? So there's no backups or snapshots of DynamoDB by default, but it is a recommended best practice within the well-architected framework. Similarly, you might have, how do I protect my data at rest when S3 buckets aren't encrypted by default, but it is, again, a best practice in terms of that well-architected framework. So how do we know what is the correct configurations without, say, building side by side while having that well-architected framework document right next to where you're actually building your cloud deployments? And misconfigurations are key in this space, right? It's going to be the #1 area of breaches and the way that breaches are happening within an environment. So let's kind of dive into this misconfiguration just a little bit more as well. We have so many options when it comes to creating, say, in this example, an S3 bucket. So you have 5 tabs across the top, you have 5 different sections, but you can change configurations and ultimately more configurations in each one of these screens as well. And because the well-architected framework is just kind of a guide, it doesn't actually tell you what should actually be done in terms of while you're clicking on different things, you actually have the ability to create misconfigurations very easily within the environment. And these are, spread out across all different types of resources that you could be building, from storage to lack of validation within that as well. And while DevOps teams are creating these cloud resources, we really need a way to actually implement remediation and automation to quickly and correct what these resources that are misconfigured in a method that makes without a person kind of going through and clicking it. So doing that in an automated fashion. So as I mentioned, Gartner is saying that 99% of all failures in security is going to be the customer's fault. And by just implementing a cloud security posture management tool, you can reduce this stat by 80%. So this is really where the kind of the key market is going in terms of checking your current cloud configurations, ensuring that it's configured correctly, and also giving you that remediation steps to making sure that if there is a misconfiguration within in the environment, you're still protected in an automated fashion as well. Some more facts that we see from our team on the back end as well. So 52% of the failures that we see are all for security issues. So this is kind of eye-opening in that security is pretty complex, and our colleagues, peers, and friends over at Aurora offer a number of security assessments to really help with this particular things as well, and making sure that the security that you're implementing within your environment is not as complex as it needs to be. And we can certainly lower this number by going through some assessments and making sure that we have the correct people, process, as well as products to essentially achieve security in a better fashion. We also know that 32% of all the failures are related to EC2 instances. This was one of the first services that AWS launched. It's also the one where you have the most configurations with it. And thus, because you have so much control over what's in an EC2 instance, so you can define the type of operating system, the version that you're deploying, the versions of your applications, the vulnerabilities within all of those different applications and operating systems, you're absolutely critical for you to actually create all of these configurations, as opposed to, say, platform as a service or software as a service, where these best practices might be automatically implemented for you. So because we have so much control over a service like EC2 instance, we also need to be more careful in terms of the configurations that we're applying within it as well. So I want to first point to a great tool in terms of continuing this education, particularly around your cloud configurations and misconfigurations, and point you to our knowledge base within the cloudconformity.com. You can essentially use this as an educational tool. It walks through step by step through each of the many services within a cloud provider. It gives you both audit and remediation for using both the dashboard of a cloud provider as well as utilizing the CLI or command line interface. There's over 600 entries for both AWS and Azure. Again, it's completely free for the security community as well as the operational community to use. So you can certainly go in, look up and audit your own environment using the knowledge base and be able to actually remediate directly from that technology as well. So just an example here of our knowledge base, you have the DynamoDB, which I talked about previously, as part of the reliability pillar. We want to make sure that we have backups that are continuously happening on this database. We can see that the risk level is high. It talks about why this should be implemented. You also have other compliance frameworks that kind of request the same thing to happen. So in this particular example, you have the NIST compliance standard that's also requiring that databases be backed up in a regular fashion. You see that it's part of the well-architected framework, and you can see that it's also part of the security and compliance frameworks as well. So first, in the knowledge base, it goes through and gives you a step-by-step guide of the AWS console, where to go, where to click to actually see if you have backups created, in this use case for DynamoDB. Also on the right, you have the ability to essentially do the same thing by querying your environment using the command line interface. And then finally, you have also the ability to do remediation and resolution using the same things. Click through the console to remediate or do it directly from the CLI. So you get that kind of bridge of cloud ops, cloud engineers who might be using the AWS console, as well as the DevOps teams or developers teams who might be wanting to, say, interface with the API or using the CLI directly to get this information as well. And so here's just a small sampling of the services that we're offering. You don't need to look at all of these. This isn't a trivia question that's happening later. But some things on this slide would definitely make for a great trivia question as well. So with the conformity engine, which basically is the front end to the knowledge base, This allows you to continuously monitor your live environments, as well as scanning all your infrastructure as code that your developers are building as well. You can scan against the well-architected framework, as well as any type of compliance frameworks that we have included as well. So things like NIST that I talked about earlier, things like PCI or HIPAA. There's so a number of different compliance checklist reports that you can get a real-time view of how you're building against these frameworks and how you're doing in terms of this environment as well. So we do over 490 million AWS checks against the well-architected framework, and we discover 230 million misconfigurations every day. And again, you can use the UI for this, as well as if your DevOps team want to automate all of this functionality, you can actually developer-friendly and developer-first design for the solution to really allow them to integrate directly with the current software pipelines that they're using as well. Here's a quick snapshot of what you see within the UI. So you have the 5 pillars across the bottom, which allows you to essentially get a score on how you're currently doing. And you also get a timeline that says, over time, I'm actually increasing my posture in terms of security. Before it was at 51% last week, now I'm at 76%. So you get all this extra information on how you're actually building against the well-architected framework, as well as easy buttons to actually improve that takes you, again, to that knowledge base that allows you to remediate this as well. So finally, I have an example here of infrastructure as code. So this is a developer tools called VS Code, where I'm essentially building an S3 bucket like the example I showed earlier. And now accessing the API, I'm saying, with the code that I have so far, how would I check out against the well-architected framework if I went and did a deployment right now? So I'm going to scan this current, and I come back with all these findings. It doesn't have logging available on. It doesn't have versioning enabled. It's not doesn't have the encryption piece of it. So it's really showing you that you need to actually add additional characteristics to this infrastructure as code that I'm building in order to making sure that I'm following what my Center of Cloud Excellence, my cloud ops teams are wanting me to follow as I'm building against this well-architected framework. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. The QR code on the left here, if you want to just use your camera, that goes to my LinkedIn profile. Happy to add all of you. I'm always sharing more information about my different experiences that I have in different customers. I get to see hundreds of different customer environments every year. And it really allows me to, as a platform, to really share those experiences and really learn and grow as a community together. So open it up to questions. Happy to take any of the questions if there is any.
So one question is, you mentioned well-architected framework for AWS. Do you always support Azure and other clouds?
That's a great question. So yes, I was pretty focused on AWS, as that was kind of our leading offering with the solution. But the entire Cloud One stack offered by Trend Micro is pretty much cloud agnostic. You might see some minor differences between the two, just how different cloud providers set up their cloud environments. But ultimately, you can expect coverage for AWS, Azure, GCP, and currently we are looking at other clouds to really help support as well.
Great, thank you, Jason. So before I hand it over to the trivia team, I just wanted to, on behalf of Aurora, thank everyone for joining. We'll be sending out a recording of the webinar for your reference. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to us at Aurora, reach out to Aurora at sales@aurorait.com, or you could also email me, marketing@aurorait.com, and I'll refer your questions to whoever it applies to. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Andy from Big Quiz Thing, and he'll be leading our trivia game.